Hi, I'm Ralph Massey. I was Minister of Education here at Ash Creek from 2000 to 2012. I have great memories of my days on staff here at Ash Creek, and I'm pleased to be making more memories as a member, singing in the choir, working in Sunday school, and those kinds of things. When I first came, our facilities did not include the 3 floors of preschool, fellowship, and adult education space on the north side of our campus, nor was there the meeting place on the south side of the campus across the street, across Stewart Street. During my 12 years of ministry here, I got to help build both of those facilities. When I started, our offices were crammed into the small white house where the TMP sits now. My office was in the front bedroom. The Minister of Youth and Minister of Music shared an adjacent room on the back of the house, and the pastor's office was in a bedroom that was added onto the back of the house sometime before. In between those offices was a living room and kitchen area that most everything had been moved out. There were desks in there, and it provided the workspace for 3 wonderful ladies who served in our church for many, many years. Church receptionist and music secretary was Susan Forbes, and she was here long before I came, as were Jewel Gathright, who was the education secretary, and Norma Blackman, who was our financial secretary. Those were great days as I was getting to know Ash Creek. These ladies helped me a great deal, and they were followed through the years with others who came along, like receptionist position, Lisa Lee and Susan Cross, who serves there now, Jan Blagg, and then Kathy Smith served as education secretaries, and Carolyn Stevens became the financial secretary. I also want to mention Ronnie Loudermilk, who was our custodial and building maintenance man. He saved the church lots of money. He was here long before I came and served several years after I arrived, and we had a great working relationship, and he was phenomenal at doing all the things that needed to be done. When he retired from the position, Roland Sparks stepped in and very capably carried on in that work. And I appreciate all of these men and women who were support staff during the years that I served here. One of the most satisfying parts of my ministry at Ash Creek was working with lay leaders like Helen Short and Jane Slate, Buddy Brock, and others. Just a lot of folks who got on the bandwagon for building a Sunday school, and we had some great days. High attendance days demonstrated what our potential was. And we didn't always reach our goal, but we reached our goal a lot of times, many times. We never quite got to that average attendance for a month that we wanted to, but we came close. And in doing that, we reached a lot of men and women, children and youth for Christ. I look back on those days as some of the golden days of my ministry, and I'm thankful to have been a part of Ash Creek during these early days of the 21st century, and I look forward to many days ahead.
My name is Jerry Dodge. I have been a member of Ash Creek Baptist Church off and on for 65 years. My dad, Edsel Dodge, Mom, Marie Dodge, and sister and I moved to Azle from Decatur when I was 2.5 years old and my sister Diana was 3 months old. My grandfather taught Sunday school in a little church between Alvord and Decatur called Hopewell Baptist Church. We drove back to that little church for 2.5 years after moving to Azle. James and Emily Reed were the first people to visit us and invite us to Ash Creek. We visited and liked the church and soon thereafter joined. Mom and Dad and James and Emily were best friends for many years until their deaths. The church building we worshiped in is now the chapel, or as we call it, the Old Fellowship Hall. The church had just gotten a new organ. I was fascinated with it. Joe Williams was the organist. We attended Sunday school, church, sunbeams, and training union. We made many new friends at once. Everyone was nice and friendly and made us feel at home. Daddy was a deacon and trustee. Mama was director of the primaries for many years, along with Ruby King and Dorothy Smithers. Many years later, we built the basement and worshiped there for many years. Joe was still the organist and Musette Watley was the pianist. Both were excellent musicians. Joe and her husband Jim moved away and Pauline Hammonds became the organist. Diana was saved when she was 8. I was saved when I was 10. We were both baptized in the basement. We built the current auditorium and moved into it. Lucy Berry became the pianist and Pauline was still on the organ. I used to sit on the front row on the organ side and was mesmerized by watching Joe play with both hands and both feet. I told my mom and dad that someday I was going to do that. They encouraged me and bought me an old upright piano. After a few years, they bought me a new Hammond organ. I took the 5 free lessons that came with the purchase and then studied with Stanley Shepowich, who was the organist at First Christian Church downtown Fort Worth. I also studied pipe organ in college. On March the 5th, 1972, I became the organist and served for 12.5 years. I then went to First Baptist Briar for 8.5 years as pianist organist. I was then asked to audition at First Baptist Church Lakeside and was organist there for 19 years. I came back to my home church and have been here ever since. I teach 4-year-olds and kindergartners in Sunday school now. I've taught Sunday school for at least 45 years, mostly in the kindergarten and first grade. I worked for Southwestern Bell Telephone, now AT&T, for 31 years. I retired and 6 weeks later became a substitute teacher in Azle. During one of my summer breaks, I saw an opening for a school librarian at Liberty Elementary School. My mom had been librarian at the Rock School for several years. I applied and got the job the same day. I was there 5 years and then retired. I continued to sub for 2 more years until my parents' health started to decline. I quit subbing to take care of them. I'm so thankful I did. Diana is still working and is office manager for an orthopedic surgeon in Fort Worth.
I'm Sami Turner, and my husband was pastor here in the 80s. And I would say that the first memory that I had of Ash Creek Baptist Church was the pulpit committee. They were really the first voices that we heard. And that was Kenny Pack and Rick Hatchett and Roger Glenn, John Seabury, Rayburn Dixon, and Joe Cross. And they were amazing guys. They were friendly and they were gracious. And I've never answered so many questions in my life, nor Jim, but they were very to the point, and they were so friendly. And believe me, they covered all the bases. There wasn't anything that they didn't cover. And so We visited all afternoon, and it was just very interesting. They were very intent and prepared. Another thing that we learned was that they did not have a parsonage. And so we had never been in a church that didn't have a parsonage. So we were a little astonished. And one of the guys said, well, you probably need to buy a home. And which turned out to be such a great blessing for us because we bought a home. And I am still enjoying that home here in Azle. So another voice that we heard all during this process and everything when we were coming was Jane Slade. She was gracious. She was most friendly, and she was so personable. And I've never known a more talented person, because when we began to know her and began to work here, she could do everything from cook a giant meal for this church to designing and decorating the sanctuary, whatever it was. She was multi-talented, a great singer in the choir, and a great friend. And so we were thankful for her that she shared her gifts with so many here at Ash Creek. And then a preacher needs a good office staff. And when we came, this was a great staff. And you know, people don't realize how important a staff is and how they keep things running and going and humming. And so Jewel Gathright was here. And if I'm not mistaken, she served here 27 years. As secretary. And then Judy Glenn, she was there 10 years. And then Irma Lou Eagle. Now listen, that lady was treasurer, but she was a treasurer herself. And she had been a treasurer for 31 years. She was a treasurer for 31 years. So what is so good, they knew their jobs and they did it well. Loved music, so Ash Creek is big for music, and we love music to worship. And when we came, Alvy, Allison, and Linda were here. And we were thrilled since we already knew Alvy's mom and dad from years ago, and him in Carbon, Texas. So we loved Alvy when he was here. And then Dr. Charlie Fuller and Cindy came when Alvy left. Then there was Larry Garrison for a while, Larry Grayson for a while, and William Collins, Randall Hall. And in those days, the music directors could do 2 or 3 jobs. Some of them served double duty, and Alvy was one. At one point, Alvy was education, music, and youth, and he did that from 73 to 81. And then Andy Anderson came while we were here as education, Andy and Liz, and he did education, youth, and singles. And then Harry Babbitt and Sheila were here, education and outreach. And of course, when we're talking music, we think about our pianist and our organist. And we know that Jerry Dodge was here from 72 to 84. Jane Greer on the organ. Lou Seabury was pianist when we came, and she served from 71, I believe, to 83. And of course, then there were other pianists, Cindy Fuller, Lindy Morgan, and of course Connie DeWeese, who came in 88 here to serve. And so all of that is good. In a church, you're seeing everything that makes a church go, but you also need to have a clean church. You want things shiny and clean, and you want all the motors running. And so Ronnie and Betty Laudermack Laudermilk did that for years. They and their boys did that. And also, Joe Gerber was here, I believe, before Ronnie and Betty. But there's so many things that make a church go and make a church run. And of course, when Jim was here, there was all kinds of activities. Everything you could name in the summer that went on, from the camps to Glorietta to music to all of it. And then we were privileged to go to Glorietta, and that was a wonderful thing. And of course, Bible school was a great part. And to think of all the faithful people who did Sunday school, training union, special studies, choirs, and all this, it would be impossible to name. But I wish we could name them, just so we could talk about all the faithful that have worked in the Lord's work here. Of course, we had puppet ministry, we had the Golden Agers, we had a people search. Oh, and we had preschool that lasted 22 years with Liz Pack as the director, and then Betty Laudermilk later and others. But the puppets were very fun with Peggy Carpenter and Brenda Price. I believe Christy and Jolie helped, and also Betty Laudermilk. Oh, I said Betty Laudermilk. And they'll get me for that one. All right, and so what I'm trying to say is that we're indebted to Ash Creek for calling us, and we love the people, and we felt they loved us. So, thank you.